Hey everybody! So today we're going to talk some more about the Galactic Center. I have somebody who has volunteered as tribute for to take a look at their chart and maybe toss out what should be focused on. I'm not gonna because this is public. I'm not gonna go super in depth with reading their chart just for privacy reasons. I'm not gonna do that, but and I'm also not gonna say who they are, other than to say that I appreciate you allowing me to do this. You know who you are. Yeah, this will primarily just be pointing out things that stand out to me. If I were going to be reading their chart from the lens of the GC, incorporating the GC into reading their chart, what I would be looking at, what I would be focused on, that kind of thing. But before I begin, I want to start with my disclaimer that while I do feel like I have a somewhat decent handle on the way the GC functions from an astrological point of view and from a scientific one, I realize that science and astrology don't always fuse together, but I do feel like that is kind of, when you're dealing with something new, that is kind of, I think, one of the ways to go to try to make sense of it, right? How to apply it to this. So while I do feel like I have a somewhat decent handle on this, I am not an expert. I want to make that very clear. Nothing that I say should actually be taken in like, that's right, that's totally right. I'm not saying that. These are just some ideas, tossing out some ideas. And I reserve the right to find any and or all of this wrong later on, without anybody throwing it in my face. Because the only way that we really learn new things is by fucking with shit. So, anyway, without further ado, I am going to show you the chart. I did take your name off, just so you know. Okay. So, this is the chart. As you can see, this person they have Neptune conjunct the GC. I actually don't have the GC pulled on this chart, but it'd be right here. Neptune's at 28 something, Sagittarius, the GC would be right here. Jupiter is retrograde. It would also be within the window that I'm looking at for the GC stuff. They do not have anything conjunct the anti-center. The anti-center would be somewhere right around here. They do have trines. They have two that I'd be looking at right here. Mercury is retrograde at 4 degrees Virgo, and the sun is at 6 degrees Virgo down here in the second house. So that's what we're dealing with as of right now. That's what we're looking at. Oh, I also wanted to mention, I'm not going to show the declinations because I didn't take their name off of that thing, but they have Mars is out of bounds. Mars actually doesn't really play into the GC in this chart. It's still out of bounds though. I would, still take that into consideration. They also have Jupiter out of bounds. Now Jupiter goes out of bounds the least, so this definitely stands out to me. And Jupiter it's at 3 degrees 8 minutes Capricorn, so it is within the window that I would be looking at for conjunctions to the GC. So we've got that out of bounds. So the GC in this person's chart, this person is actually somebody who has, let's see, their 6th house starts at, it starts at 27 Sagittarius, 27 degrees, 24 minutes Sagittarius. So since the GC is it would have been at 26 something when they were born, the GC is actually in their 5th house. But because the planets conjunct the GC are in the 6th, the sixth house is going to be influenced. So the GC, but like I mentioned in that other video last week, because we're dealing with two houses, it's kind of spread out over two houses, and it really is in this person's case because the GC is actually in the fifth house and their conjunction planets are in the sixth. So it really does feel like it is more spread out here. Probably might help them out, really. Not having one area of life impacted strongly, but having it kind of spread out over two areas of life, if that makes sense. It might ease, it might make that energy easier. I don't really know a better word to use. I don't really know if any of it's easy, but it might make it easier. That's kind of where my mind goes with it. It might. So it's going to play out in, things like all of that energy from the GC is going to play out in areas of life having to do with like their hobbies, what they enjoy doing. If they have any children, it might play out with their children. Since fifth house is also kids. Other sorts of fifth house things, I could name them all, but you get the idea. It'll play out in fifth house areas of life. Also, it'll play out in sixth house areas of life. So you're talking things like just routine, daily routine, the work that they do in daily life, the way that they serve, all of these kinds of things. Fifth house, also self-expression, creative self-expression. So it'll play out there too. So the GC is going to impact both of those areas of life, but it's going to be spread out over both areas of life. So it doesn't feel like, while the energy is still very strong, it's more dispersed, if that makes sense. Now, Neptune is going to take the biggest hit here. This does make me, but we are dealing with Neptune, right? And Neptune's kind of a weird one to have conjunct the GC, because Neptune is so unconscious as it is. Neptune is unconscious. It is more unconscious energy. It's more dreamy. It's more not of this world. So I do wonder what happens when somebody has Neptune conjunct the GC. And this person's Neptune is actually in the sixth house. So I'm wondering if this person actually, I could see this going a couple ways. I could see this perhaps being somebody who could have a real difficult time in the real world. I could see it going that way. Like real physical life feels difficult to them. Or on the better or easier end of things, they might be able to make the things that they dream about, the things that they create, they might really be able to, the ways that they are creative, the things that they imagine, they might really be able to bring them into the physical world. I'm almost inclined to feel like it could go that way for this person, because they do have trines. They do have ways to bring the shit down to earth. They do. Now, you have to utilize those, right? But these do exist for this person. So it does make me think that this really could be a much easier thing than a difficult thing once those trines are utilized. Now, they don't have anything conjunct the anticenter, meaning that when that energy overflow or whatever it is, when it gets to be too much at the GC and it shoots over to the anticenter, that area, right, near the near the 11th, 12th house, near the 12th house cusp and into the 12th house, and right on the, right at the very end of the 11th, that's where the anticenter is. So those areas of life are going to be shocked, and there is nothing there to kind of filter it, if you will, filter the shocking or take the shock. So just those areas of life are going to take the shock. So you're looking at, obviously, things like groups of people, friends, long-term goals. All of those things might be shocked. And even perhaps, since Gemini is actually the ruler of the 12th house, or sorry, not the rule, on the cusp of the 12th house. That's how I should have put that. There's like the unconscious communication that they do with themselves is also going to be hit. That makes me think that it might be harder for them to make sense of the unconscious communication that they have with themselves. Again, I have not completely, this is not a client of mine. This is not anybody that I've read for before. So I haven't read their chart even through a regular lens. So I'm just tossing some ideas out about this, how this might possibly manifest. So those areas of life might get shocked. They might be kind of blinded over, clouded over. Could be. Now, they do have Jupiter retrograde. It's conjunct the GC, so they are tuned in to the GC. They are tuned in. They do have trines. They have, like I said before, they have Mercury retrograde. It's trine in Virgo. They have in sextile the anti-center. And they have the sun there too. Now, the sun is at 6 degrees 10 minutes Virgo, so I would actually probably look at Mercury first. Mercury would be what I would look at first. Just because it's closer to being in, it's a closer trine. Now Mercury is retrograde, which I actually feel like helps them here. Because as I've mentioned before, I do think that Mercury retrograde, there is something about it that has an affinity for the galactic anti-center, just as I've mentioned that I think Jupiter retrograde has an affinity for the galactic center. So having Mercury retrograde, sextile the anti-center, and trine the GC, it does make me feel like this person actually really can utilize the GC to their benefit. They can. A lot of this, I think, they're dealing with Mercury retrograde here and Jupiter retrograde. They've got both of the communication planets retrograde. So I think a big deal for this person, and they're in the second house. And it's in Virgo. So, Mercury retrograde, it's one of those that it gets thrown a lot of noise. Mercury retrograde gets a lot of noise thrown at it. And it has to figure out, bird was loud, it needs to figure out exactly what it needs to be taking in the first place, into its mental headspace. What actually matters to it and what doesn't. Tune out the noise. This Mercury retrograde is noisy. Now, I do feel like it in Virgo, it might help it be a little bit less noisy. Maybe. It might. But Virgo is such a, Mercury retrograde people need to learn how to trust their intuition and and what they need to be taking in the first place. They need to do this from an intuitive place. In Virgo, that might be a little harder because Virgo is not, Virgo is intuitive in its own way, but it is more physical in nature, more rooted in the real world. So it does need to, this person will need to make sure that the information that they are taking in and the information that they are communicating back out, that that it's not just noise. They need to make sure that they aren't taking in or communicating noise. Now, and I don't say that in any kind of offensive way. Noisiness is such a big deal here. And I feel like the more noise there is for this person, the less they're going to value how they communicate, or value what they need to communicate. And I feel like, you know, with Jupiter retrograde, this person they're already going to know things and understand things and not really know why they understand them, why they know these things to be true. So tuning out the noise from the Mercury angle is very, very important, and only taking in what really matters to them, what really resonates, and letting go of the shit that doesn't. That's a big part to the translation, I feel like here. A big, big part to the fluid translation of all of this. A huge part. And because this is in the second house, you know, actually valuing what they have to say is important. Obviously, it's very important. And, you know, tuning out the noise in Virgo's precise. Virgo is perfection. So this person, there might be like, they're taking in so much noise, not really getting a handle on any one thing, but at the same time, on the other, you know, on the Jupiter end of things, they can see the big picture. So I think a big deal here is going to be tuning out the noise from the Mercury end and working backwards to understand what they already understand from the Jupiter end. And if they can do both of these in tandem, the way that they communicate could be on fucking fire. It really could be. It really, really could be. But both of these have to be worked from backwards motion. Or Jupiter has to be worked from backwards motion. Mercury needs to be worked from, you know, putting things together piece by piece. But Mercury is really, really, really important to the translation of the energy at the GC. And how they do that matters. Taking the time to break things apart. From Jupiter, break things down, break things apart. And then from Mercury, making sure that they're putting things together piece by piece. Because if these two things aren't happening in tandem, it's like it's too scattered. It feels too fucking scattered. It just feels too fucking scattered. And with all the energy going on at the GC, it feels like if that's scattered, it all kind of gets lost, if that makes sense. Like, so Mercury is very, 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 very important to the translation of anything downloaded from the GC, any intuitive hits from the GC, anything like that. It's very important. But I do think that this person actually can translate this stuff, and they can translate it well. Like, they actually are in what I consider to be kind of an advantageous position here. I think they are. But anyway, I'm going to get going because it's got kind of long. But those are definitely some things that, you know, when you're looking at the GC, when you're looking at, these are things that you would want to look at and kind of where you'd want to play with and how you'd want to play with it in your mind. Just some things you might want to look at. But anyway, I'm going to get going. So if you want to follow us on Instagram, you can find us at Let's Fuck With Astrology. I'm at Saturn Season Astrology on Instagram. Natalie is at Abaturno Astrology on Instagram. If you want to like and subscribe to our videos or whatever on YouTube, you can find us by searching for Let's Fuck With Astrology in the YouTube search bar. If you do the Reddit thing, come join us on the subreddit Let's Fuck With Astrology. And if you're interested in the star cards, go to letsfuckwithastrology.com/star-cards. Okay, y'all. I'll see y'all later.